I'm doing consulting on DHER matters, especially on the issue of sub-rehab. It's quite significant changes have been the last 5 years, as people know, since 2019. Today we'll try to cover as much possible. We have a professional over here, entrepreneur who's developing, owning, and managing thousands of units for decades. He started way before the young generation knew about the DHER and how a vacancy can become profitable. And we have this distinguished honor today to have Eric Margules, who will talk about the DHER from a historic perspective till current, when the changes recently been so drastic. Eric, the mic is yours. But before you start, I want to make sure that we covered most people over here. I see as young people who don't remember the old days, and they would probably like to know the more pressing issues of cotton.
Okay.
The most pressing issues basically is 2019 has been a year for the DHER changes. It's still evolving. Every year it's coming new changes. People want to know, from your perspective, if somebody goes into a multifamily, what should you look out for? When is a building become real profitable, and what you should not touch, of course? And if he is in some situation, what is the best way he should go forward?
Okay, I can speak to that. My name is Eric Margules. I own 50 buildings in Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and Jersey City. I've been doing this for, they're beautiful, thank you. I've been doing this for 30 years, so I've seen quite a bit of change. Excuse me. It used to be that you could buy a building, say the average rent was $700, but you knew that on the open market it would be worth $2,000. If you get a vacancy, you can renovate the apartment, and you got 1/40th of the amount that you put into the apartment as a raise in the rent. So if you put $40,000 in, the apartment monthly rent was raised by $1,000. You can also, there was a vacancy allowance for a certain percentage that you got. So basically you can do this, that, and the other thing and bring the apartment up to market. You can also a lot of times the apartment, if it was over $2,700, you can leave rent stabilization altogether. So it was a good deal. The tenants were protected while they were in place, and the landlords were able to get money out, get a return on their investment. The world changed on June 14th, 2019, and that game is not available anymore. Essentially, the formulas are very convoluted, and it depends how many units you have. It depends whether you own other buildings. It depends on a lot of different things. So you really can't basically raise rents. So if you have somebody who's been living there for 30 years, 40 years, and they leave the apartment, they were paying $900. If you go in there and renovate, you can bring the rent up to $1,000, something like that. So, but in order to get that increase, you have to put in this investment, which the return on it is something a little bit over 6%. And we all know that, return over 6% is basically nothing. Then there's also a cap on the amount of money that you can actually put into an apartment. And so if you say, okay, I have to cut corners, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, the tenant could then haul you into court, and the court is going to order you to renovate the apartment or to put more money into the apartment to make it habitable, and you're not going to get any return on your money. And personally, I don't trust the city, I don't trust the courts, I don't trust the state, and so I'm not playing that game. And we all have basically, we all know of people who have apartments that they're sitting vacant. This is in the middle of a housing shortage, and we have big fanfare that there's a whole rezoning going on in Gowanus or wherever else, and they're able to build 2,400 units. Well, if they would just change the laws and allow us to put money into the apartments, we would in 6 months we would have 40,000, 50,000 units back on the market. I mean, it's just insanity. People can't see past their noses. And it's very distressing for me, and I'm sure for many people who own rent-stabilized apartments, there's nothing you can do. You're watching your buildings disintegrate. There's no money to put into the buildings. Like I have buildings, like, in some of the buildings, taxes since 2019 have increased by 35%, and all the expenses also go that way. And my income has increased by about 8 to 10% because there's no way to increase the rents other than the rent stabilized increases, which this year are 2.75%, despite the fact that inflation at the time was over 5%. Before that, it was 9%, and we had zero increases. It's basically a game that the legislature is playing in Albany, and they're milking us dry, and they don't understand that when you have a 120-year-old building, if you don't put money into the building, it's going to disintegrate. It's going to fall apart. And we're watching that happen left and right. And there's little we can do about this. And it's just shameful. Why somebody needs a $600 a month rent doesn't make sense to me. Get another job, work another night a week. Something like that. It's folly, and we're playing with our housing stock. I have a lot of involvement in Miami also. And in Miami, they understand that when you have a housing shortage, the way out of a housing shortage is to build more housing. And in Miami, rents are coming down. There's 25,000 units coming online in the next 12 to 18 months. And we see the rent levels going down. It's not great for landlords, but at least you're able to build stuff, and you're able to, if you're smart, you can get a return on your investment. In New York, there's just no way, no matter how smart you are, no matter how crafty you are, you're not getting a return on your investment, and it doesn't bode well for what's going on in the city or the state.
What would you advise a young entrepreneur going now in the business, still has a knack for real estate, generational, family, just a feeling? What is his best options, even with those tough, challenging times?
Well, there are some buying opportunities, and they're hard to find. But I would say, it's the same thing as just the regular classic real estate play. You buy a good location. You want to buy low rents that you're not going to have a lot of risk with. You want to buy it with a good return, say over a 7% cap rate, and something like that. Well-located properties at good prices still makes sense. Interest rates hopefully will someday come down, and hopefully they'll at some point understand that that landlords need to put money into the buildings to keep them viable. I know that the old laws where it had been that you can renovate and you can add, you can increase rents. That money a lot of times was used to fix up the hallways, to replace the boiler with a more efficient one, and there's nothing like that going on. I've laid off. Well, I had a stable. Used to have a stable of about 7 or 8 contractors who each employed 10 people. They're all out of work. The banks that I'm dealing with are left and right pulling loans. When the loans go to reset, they say, sorry, we're not going to give you, we're taking that option away. And, they leave the borrowers scrambling, and the regional banks are going under. And it just doesn't make any sense. The legislation has made this into a zero-sum game, pitting landlords against tenants. And it does not have to be that way. Everybody can win. And, to me, the solution is so elegantly simple that I don't understand why it's not going on. I do know why it's going on, because people are stupid. But, we have it. Basically, if somebody moves out, you have to be able to renovate that apartment and bring it up to market. That will, and then the people who are living there, their increases in the rent should be the CPI. And we have every year there is a vitriolic battle between landlords and tenants, and they're set up to hate each other. It doesn't have to be that way, and it's really terrible. And what also happens is basically these rent stabilized apartments, which represent 1/3 of the housing stock in New York City, it doesn't count. They're not available, because when a low rent apartment gets vacant, it becomes vacant, it stays vacant, and it just leaves the housing stock. So there's a lot that can be done, and a lot can be done quickly and easily and simple, but people have to understand what's going on, and they don't understand. Excuse me. There was floated in the city, the city council, that they wanted everybody to put in sprinklers, and putting in sprinklers, installing sprinklers into an apartment is going to cost $25,000 to $50,000. It's going to require displacing the tenant for 6 months, and you're going to run up with lead paint issues and asbestos issues, and it's just crazy. And it's just regulation. There's a problem with a regulation, and you put another regulation on to solve it. Just Band-Aid, one after the other. And if I were able to renovate my apartments, when I renovate an apartment, we put in sheetrock on the walls and the ceilings, and what that does is sheetrock is fire rated for 3.5 hours, which means that if there's a fire in the apartment, it's contained. It doesn't spread to the rest of the building. So you don't need a sprinkler system. They're talking about requiring all these regulations in order to make the buildings more energy efficient. Well, I can tell you, if I renovate an apartment, I put in new appliances, I put in new windows, and all that stuff. Maybe new heating system. I can afford to put in a new boiler, which is more efficient. Everything. It's just so frustrating to me. Then I guess you can tell, but it's really. It's crazy that that's not allowed, and who knows how much money you have. Like, how much money are we spending on the DHCR every year? I think we're spending. I'm not sure if it's 300 million. I tried Googling it and looking it up. I'm not sure if it's 300 million or like 1.2 billion. But whatever it is, use that money and build affordable housing. Everything is. It's just so easy. We don't need it. We have reams and reams of paperwork, because we have to keep things. We have to keep records, and then you have the court system is clogged up because maybe I charged $12 too much, and now I have to pay treble damages on that. If you just had vacancy decontrol, and then it goes by CPI every year, well, that's simple to follow. The cases are open and shut. You don't have to go out and analyze 2 feet worth of paperwork, and go back 7 tenants. The city they just don't understand. They're putting in these pilot programs where if you want to renovate your building, your small building, you have to go back and find all the tenants for the last 12 years and make sure they weren't harassed. Okay, fine. So now we have 8 units that could have been built. Now they're sitting vacant because we're punishing the landlord to make sure that there was no harassment going on. There are laws in place for anti-harassment, and nobody thinks that landlords should be harassing tenants. And and if they do harass tenants, they should be punished for that. But you don't invent a whole system like this to ensure that there's no incentive to harass a tenant. Right now there's no. If a $700 apartment vacates, that should be great news for everybody, because now we can renovate this apartment, have a new apartment available to young people to come in. But that's not happening. $700 apartment vacates, and it just sits there, and nothing happens, and it just leaves the housing stock. And it's just folly, and it's just frustrating that we can fix this system so easily if we had some sanity going on in Albany. Thank you.
What would you advise for somebody who is a current owner, a landlord, and he wants to know in 10 years from now he did everything right. How should he, in the morning he walks into his management office, make sure everything is in a row, what would you advise him to do?
In what situation?
To make sure that he's on the right path with his tenants, nothing will...
I mean, what paperwork should he look at to...
Not paperwork. How should he run his management significantly good, that down the road nothing will hurt him?
Well, unfortunately, you have to keep reams of paperwork. You have to make sure that everything is done to the letter of the law. And if you get hauled into court, you're screwed. You know, I mean, the courts are stacked against landlords. They're not fair. They adjourn things. I mean, I've had, just yesterday, I had a clear-cut case of non-payment, and it's already been going on for about 9 months. And we went in there, and it was postponed to October because the tenant, I don't even know what the tenant did, but whatever it is, postponed to October. So there's another 4 months rent. And they're wondering why we can't pay our taxes. You know, taxes, like I said before, taxes went up 35% in the same time that they wouldn't let me raise my rents for more than 8% in the same five-year period. And, you know, if they don't let me raise my rents by 8%, then they shouldn't have their taxes go up by more than 8%. You know, it's just, there are just many standards that are contradictory, and it's not easy. It's not easy to be a rent-stabilized landlord in New York City.
In your mind, is there a formula how to prevent to pick a bad tenant?
It's getting tough to pick tenants also. You know, we do credit checks, but I don't know, did they make it illegal to do background checks? You can't check court records. You can't discriminate against source of income, even though banks can discriminate against you if you have the wrong source of income in your tenants.
You may have all these data, but you're not allowed to base the decision on this.
That's correct. You know, landlords are boxed in almost every direction, and you see now buildings that are selling at 60% of what the seller bought it for, you know, 5-8 years ago, and it's going to crash. The market is going to crash. We're going to lose our housing stock. And there really are two cities here. There's rent-stabilized city where the housing is just going away, and then you have these gleaming towers where the rents are $10,000 and up. And you know, but now we have good cause eviction. So the $10,000 and up gleaming towers are still viable. There are no controls there, but where we did have a pathway out on some of the buildings where you had a certain percentage that were still free market, you're contained on how much you can raise those rents. So there's almost no path to make these buildings viable under the current laws.
Let's talk a little more positive. Would you support going exclusively into FAPs, Section 8 contracts, regulatory programs, non-for-profits?
I can understand that people make a living out of that. Yeah, I don't do that. It's very tough, you know, because a lot of times you're dealing with people who they can't pay their rent, and you know, I think it's important for people to have a stake in society. And if you're given something for free, you don't appreciate that. And that goes across the board, no matter who it is, no matter what it is you're given for free. People don't appreciate things. And so we need to incentivize people to have a stake in society. And, you know, through paying a portion of the rent, but, you know, it's fine. You know, they have to be working. They have to support. You know, we're all in this together. We can't have people who are not doing anything for us, you know, for society, benefiting.
So basically, you're supporting if there is a Section 8 tenant that needs to add $200 instead of fabs that gets all free, you would rather go with someone who needs to pay something?
Yeah, Section 8 people are great. You know, they're great. They're down on their luck or whatever. But you know, if they're paying a portion of their rent, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. You know, they're good people.
Do anyone have any questions to our professional today? Take the mic over there.
Okay, hi there. Thank you for the presentation. I think we all share your frustrations
For sure.
with the way the market is. One thought I had was, have you ever explored substantial improvement to get a building at the free market or condo conversion? Is there any difficulties with that? Any success? And any other methods we may not be thinking about?
The short answer, no, I haven't done that kind of stuff. You know, you need substantial vacancy on something like that. You know, and if you have rent-stabilized tenants, you're not getting the building vacant. You know, unless you buy it vacant or largely vacant.
So let me take that question. We do that type of consulting. I should not be advertorial over here, but yes, there is a lot of opportunity, but you need to be very careful and well thought out. People do a lot of mistakes, and when it's all finished, just because they didn't check one box off, the whole investment of a few $1 million is down. And so people need to be very careful. And the carefulness, I need to tell people who are listening, you need to be very careful of the history of the DHCR. You need to be very careful of the history of the tenants, and need to be very careful with how this building is becoming vacant or has become vacant. Meaning to say, the tenant, they're using now the buyouts against the sub-rehab application, because the statute is very, it's a two-pronged statement. It says it needs to be in sub-rehab that in such situation that the tenants cannot live there. So if you do a buyout, that means that the tenants were lovely living there. So how would you pay $100,000 a buyout when the tenant wants to live there? If he doesn't want to live there, why do you need to pay $100,000? So that needs to be well thought out. It needs to be thought out. Basically, the whole DHCR approach is now the displacement of tenants. If you can prove that you didn't displace a tenant, or you got them at the same arrangement somewhere else, it's vacant for 10 years, it was only a two-family that doesn't need, there's no protections. Basically, you didn't displace the tenants even with buyouts. So there is a lot of consulting going into how to do it, but again, there's money to be made, but needs to be well thought out from the beginning.
Are those concerns for a condo conversion also, or you don't have those concerns on a condo conversion?
They will not approve you with the same concerns. If it's involved displacement, they will make a big issue out of you.
Yeah,
and it's still evolving.
I'm actually looking at a package of buildings where we have J51s and 421A, and it's a nightmare to go through all the paperwork and to make sure that, like Isaac said, all your boxes are checked properly. You know, because you really do keep yourself open. Assuming we get past that, which we're actually in due diligence now, it's a wild buy. I'm looking for investors, by the way, if anybody's interested. But it's, you know, it's J51, 421A, Article 11, if you know what that is. Article 11 is something where if you agree for the next 40 years to keep your apartments or your building under rent stabilization, your taxes are something like 5% of what they normally would be. So it's a great program. The problem is that I have a building which has been accepted into it, and we've been dealing with this for over a year, and they keep on pushing off the date when we're actually closing. I know another situation where somebody has already been accepted and closed on the program, and the city has still not adjusted the taxes. So, all these things, all these programs, you're dealing with the city and they're looking to do the gotcha thing. So you really got to be careful about that.
Exactly. Would like to conclude, but before you leave, you touched a very sensitive matter, J51 and 421-1A. There is a lot of opportunity now with buildings that is these years expiring, next year and the next few years. People need to be very careful. There's a lot of nuances how you can the 421A J51 needs to go out from regulatory to free market. It needs to be in the leases, needs to be documented, needs to be the improvements at that time is not allowed to be from any HPD grant, or there was a section of the government gave you grants to rehab. So if you rehab the apartment from government funds, you're not allowed, even if it's a J51 approved, you're not allowed to take it. So there's a lot of nuances how to make sure that the J51, the 421A is really the one.
There's actually a whole cottage industry of consultants that you hire, for $10,000, and they will go through every little nuance of all the paperwork going back 550 years, make sure nothing's been mistaken.
Make it quick.
Thank you so much. You did not sugarcoat it. You said it the way it is, and everybody is with you on that. Is it fair to say that to fix this, we'll need a real fix in laws? That means politicians that do understand what the real needs, that are in touch what the public needs and what to bring up the economy. Otherwise, everybody, all the investors, including my company, we are going rather to Florida than over here because the laws are stacked against us. Is it fair to say that we need to elect better ones? And if yes, is it city, in your opinion, or in the state, or in everything?
Both. Yeah, well, of course we need to elect better people. Because people suck. Albany sucks. And City Hall I don't even know if it's better. We have all these regulations that are insane that are being put on us from City Hall. And Albany is the place where all these wonderful laws come from in the first place. So yeah, everybody throw the bums out. They're really bad.
Does it trickle down to the federal government as well, or it sticks only to?
Yes, financing became a federal issue.
Well, and I always say that Hochul is better than Cuomo, and Adams is better than De Blasio. So instead of Fs, they're D+, C-. It's tough.
But maybe it's time that we have to get together and fight it as one, rather than, everybody's looking, that's my portfolio and all that.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Because that's not going to get us nowhere.
Let's do it.
Let's conclude and leave the political debate in another
It's
session.
nothing to do with political. It's fact. That's what I meant to say.
No, but we are...
Yes, the easy way out, political. But the thing is, yes, people are suffering.
Yeah, we all agree. Thank you so much.
That's it.
Make it quick because we're off.
You just mentioned you're dealing with a tenant.
Yeah.
I say you just mentioned you were dealing with a tenant, 9 months, October court date. Have you ever gotten creative in, out of box thinking on how to get these tenants out? Because I'm actually jealous of 9 months. We have a tenant we're dealing with that has a 2-year, no lease, no rent, and we still don't have a date for eviction.
But there's no incentive to get these people out. If they're not paying their $900 rent and they leave, then there's not even anybody in the apartment to possibly pay it. There's no incentive whatsoever. So yeah, it used to be, that was another thing. These tenants would get $100,000 payouts to leave, and now they can't, that's gone. That's gone.
Okay, thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful event. It's nice to talk.